Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to this class on mastering conversational skills. You know the two of us, Mr. Kamat and Miss Kamat. Hi, Miss Kamat. How are you doing?
Good. Well,
Good. You're not well. Whoever's watching this program, Arunima, has been a little under the weather while creating the content for this, and I must also kind of share this thing with you. We've worked on so many content kits and so many programs so far that you'll have watched, so many classes that you watched, but I think we have put our biggest effort on this class. Don't you think, Arunima?
yes. And I also think this is by far my favorite content piece.
Your favorite content piece. I think it's going to be a great piece as well. We had some existing content on this, but we really wanted to kind of do our best on this class, and I hope you guys appreciate it and like this class and appreciate the effort, especially Arunima has put into it. So let's dive into mastering conversational skills. Okay, Arunima.
Yes.
Okay, lots of things to share. Introduction to conversational skills. Okay, a conversation is a talk between two or more people where thoughts and ideas are exchanged, right? All of us know what a conversation is. The objective of a conversation is to know something or or someone better, right? That's the reason why you're having a conversation. You know, want to know about something and you want to know about someone and or about that, right? And that's the reason why you're having a conversation with someone. A good conversation, this is a very good idea, right? A good conversation is where people add value to each other, either in the form of some knowledge or entertainment. And that knowledge could be any kind of knowledge. It doesn't need to be knowledge like this knowledge, right? And what entertainment means is that all of us enjoy a humorous, funny conversation that you'd have with someone, right? We really enjoy that and we draw the value of entertainment out of that conversation, and that's really valuable as well. Conversation is all about taking turns to speak and ask questions. It's a dialogue, it's not a monologue, right? That's what a conversation is between two people. Okay, now, unlike most of the other subjects that we have delivered training on, the subject of conversational skills is something which falls squarely in the realm of your professional life and also in the realm of your personal life, right? So the contents of this workshop or this class really apply to both situations, professional and personal, and they apply equally to both, unlike most of the other stuff that we do, right? For example, when we took a class on grooming, that's not grooming for your personal life, that's grooming largely from the point of view of office or your professional life, and most subjects are taken in that manner. But this subject is a slightly different subject where what you learn will fall in both subjects, right? Personal and professional. Now, the other thing about this class is that it's a difficult class to create content on. And the reason why it's difficult is um, we are conversing with people all the time, right? As human beings, if you're a human being, you're conversing with people all the time. And you are conversing with people in different situations, and you're conversing with different types of people, and you are conversing sometimes with them for the first time, and sometimes you're conversing with them every day, and sometimes you're conversing with the same person probably once every 2 years, right? So the situations in terms of conversational skills are so different that it's very difficult for us to give you one definitive answer of how to go about making conversation. But what we've done, and the reason why we've brainstormed so much on this topic, is I can assure you that most of the things that you will cover here will by and large apply to most situations where you'll make conversations, right? So these are really robust principles of what you need to do. They won't apply to all situations, but by and large they'll apply to most situations, right? So that's something to keep in mind, because otherwise when you're going through this content, you may think, oh, but how can I use this line with this person, or how can I do this with this person? No, we can't tell you exactly what line to use which person. That's where you're going to have to use your common sense. That's where you're going to have to use your own discretion around how to go about doing it, and that nobody can help you out with. Of course, you can talk to your coach about the queries that you have, and when you do the role play, you may need a few more details about this thing, but you need to keep that in mind, because otherwise you're not going to understand what we're going to teach you over the next, I don't know, hour and a half on this subject, right? So I just want to reiterate. Number one, difficult to kind of give you specific answers when it comes to this, because we're having conversations all the time. We're having conversations in different situations. We're having conversations with different people, and sometimes with those same people we're having conversations, sometimes every day, sometimes once a week, sometimes once a year, sometimes once in 10 years, right? So we can't really tell you exactly what to do in what situation. So most of the things that you're going to learn here may not apply to all situations, but they're principles that will let you make great conversation in most situations, whether they're in your personal life and or your professional life. Okay, Arunima, before you come in, I'll just make another point, right? So if you remember, especially the first four classes that you attended, right? A lot of that content revolved around how to speak in a business context, how to receive information in a business context, right? Or how to send information in business, how to receive information in a business context, right? So when we spoke about the topic of listening, probing, and reconfirming, if you remember, we were like, okay, listen well to the person, then see whether he's given you specific and clear information, then ask questions, get all the specific details that you want, then reconfirming. So it was a very business meeting led conversation, dialogue that we kind of played out for you there. But here we're talking about how do you like make conversation with people when where one of your main objectives is to build relationships with people, to build rapport with people that will help you both in your personal and professional life, right? So that's the main difference between what we discussed earlier. That was more about how do I receive instructions for somebody, how do I receive a brief from somebody in a business setting, right? Or how do you give a brief to somebody, how do you delegate, how do you, so all of that was in a business context. Here the conversational skills piece is about, oh, how do I converse with a person at a party, right? At a business party that you could go for, or a personal party that you could go for. How can I make conversation with a client before I get engaged in business related discussions with him? So how do I make conversation with him then? How do I make conversation with a colleague when we're having lunch together, right? It's that context as well of how you'll go about doing that. How do you make conversation with a colleague or your boss if you're traveling by car with them for a meeting, right? You have a 1 hour kind of duration in the car. How do you make conversation with them? And of course the same thing in your personal lives, right? If you meet a friend, how do you have a great conversation? Because you're the relationships that you form in your personal and professional life are extremely important for both your professional success and your personal happiness, right? The relationships that you form with people help you both in your professional life and your personal life. And the route to building good relationships is your ability to have good conversations with people, if it's a short conversation or it's a long conversation, right? So that's the context of what we're discussing here, and that's why this subject is so important to you, right? Yes, Arima, come in.
Right. One point you've already covered, which is the key difference between a business communication where it's very
Yeah.
objective driven,
Yeah.
and your objective more often is to either convey something or get information or get some action done,
Yeah.
versus the objective here being the rapport building or the relationship building. So I wanted to bring
Correct.
that up.
Yeah.
The
Can I,
second point I
before
want,
you go
yeah,
to your second point, Arunima, I just want to, I think you said it way more beautifully than I said it, right? Where in a business discussion, like we've gone on from the first class, right? Is You want to get your message across or receive your message across in a way where it's understood specifically, clearly, without any doubt, right? So understanding
Correct.
plays a key role in business communication. And secondly, when you're sending out communication, you want to do it in a way where objectives are met. Now,
Correct.
you drew a very nice comparison between conversational skills, right? Conversational skills, the objective in a way is to build the relationship, build the rapport
Yeah.
between you and that person. You want to
Yeah.
get to know that person better so that a relationship is formed, and you want them to know you better so a relationship is formed. So there's no specific objective beyond the objective of building a rapport relationship. So that's again a key
Correct.
difference between what you studied earlier during this thing and what this class is about. So that's a
Correct.
point that you very made very well, better than I did.
Essentially there is no real action that comes out of sometimes out of conversational skills, because again it's your objective there is just that you have a better relationship with the person, but you
Yeah,
don't necessarily need the other person to do something,
correct,
which is
correct,
something very different than a business communication. The
correct.
second point, when you were talking about how you have to apply these principles with sort of your sensibilities in terms of
Yeah,
what works in what situation, that is often because, of course, we are always conversing, but this is the point that I was discussing with you earlier, where conversations which are not business conversations are
mm,
often not linear in nature, which means they
yeah,
can just take any direction
yeah,
depending on what the other person says or what thought you have.
yeah,
And again, that I think differentiates between a very structured business communication versus a conversation that you often have, which may not be as structured, may not follow a real uh, yeah, sort of just goes in one line. It kind of can go
correct.
take one place
All
to
over the
another point to another
all over
point,
the
all
place.
over the place.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it's very important for the people watching this session to also remember that and keep that in mind while they're going through this content.
I think again beautifully put by you, Arunima. I just want to add something to you in a conversational method, right?
Right.
So what tends to happen when we're having business conversations is you often don't want to digress from the point or sometimes the agenda that you have, right, for that
Correct.
meeting or interaction. For example, if you're making a presentation on a certain issue and you have somebody from the audience who asks a question on something which is not related to that presentation at all, you want to very politely tell him that, hey, great question, but let's discuss this offline because I really want to finish what we're here for. And
Correct.
that's how business communication is supposed to be, where you don't digress. And as a matter of fact, conversations are supposed to be the bang opposite, right?
Correct.
Because often when you meet people and you talk about one thing, and very seamlessly the conversation goes into a different territory, and very seamlessly it goes into another topic, and you probably spend a couple of hours. You're like, oh wow, this person is great company. And often if you go on a date, you'll think it's love, right? Because you'll be like, oh, I spoke to this guy for 2 hours, and it was so kind of seamless and so easy to talk to this person.
Correct.
And you spoke about one thing, then you spoke about other thing, then you spoke about other things. So we had read that definition that says, in a way, conversational skills, sometimes you need to keep to the point, and then sometimes you also need to move off point, right? So you need to have that little nice dance that you do between sometimes
Correct.
being on the point and then moving to the next point if both of y'all have kind of exhausted talking about one point, right? That's the kind of nice
Correct.
dance that you need to do away from it, in a way, right? Arunima, conversational skills, this topic is so damn important to people, right? If you believe as a human being that relationships and rapport are important in your personal and professional life, you better think that this topic is important, right? And you better know how to do it, because anybody that's been in business long enough will tell you that, the key ability that you need to have as a leader, as a professional, is your ability to get along with people, right? And if you don't know how
Correct.
to make good conversation, it's impossible for you to get along with people. How else are you going to get along with people, right? The crux
Correct.
is your ability to converse. While you may do other things as well, like to build your relationship, there are lots of other things, but this is in a way the center of it all. So better get good at it, right?
Another thought that occurred to me
Yeah.
is, if you think about it, everyone, perhaps barring your family,
Mm,
right, but every other relationship you have it
Mm.
all started from small talk or like a conversation, and then it built into a relationship. So I
Yeah.
think that kind of shows the power of conversations and these
Yeah.
skills, where
Yeah.
probably your best friend today was a stranger to you at some point, and then you
Absolutely.
started with just a conversation and slowly built on that, and that's how
Mm.
they've become such a significant part of your life.
Yeah.
So again,
Absolutely.
barring those 3 or 4 people, and of course your extended family you're born into,
Yeah.
beyond that, everyone you know, the relationship has only been cultivated because of your ability to converse with them,
Such a
among
beautiful
other
point.
things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
such a
So
beautiful point. To add to that, I want to. I think we're going to riff a lot on this, right? Because it's such an interesting topic. Whoever's watching this class, we've been doing this all day because we've been having such interesting conversations on the topic of conversational skills. Because, it is such an important integral part to us as human beings on both your professional and personal side. So, Arunima, um, you spoke about friends and how a person goes about making friends based on a conversation that you just start one day with that person. That
correct.
said, even if you want to have a good relationship with your sibling, or if you want to have
Correct.
a good relationship with a parent, or if you want to have a good relationship with a child, for that matter, if your child is old enough, the strength of your relationship even with your family members is going to be based on your ability to have good conversational skills,
Correct.
right? And so often we see that is such a big problem. I'm sure many people watching this thing would even agree that sometimes we don't even have good conversational skills with our spouse, and that can cause so much of friction, right? Because you don't have and it's very difficult to have good conversational skills with your spouse, because more often than not you end up taking them for granted. But the point that I'm trying to make is it's not just the external relationships that you've built where conversational skills have played an integral part. The quality of your relationships that you have just at home with your immediate family, that too would depend on your ability to have good conversations with them. No, doesn't that make
Correct.
sense?
Yeah,
Right? so
absolutely.
so it's such a powerful skill, and that's why I think the both of us have been thrown aback by the depth of this topic through the time that we've worked on this, right? And we had some knowledge about this, but this has been such an eye opener for us, right? And I hope it is for you as well. I hope this part that we've just discussed itself is such an eye opener, knowing how important it is. And in a way, even before we go through the rest of the content, I just hope a realization here for people is that, hey, I need to become better at making conversation with my immediate family, in my professional life, with my friends. And I need to get skilled at it, and I'm going to use a lot of these principles in every conversation that I'm going to have from here on. Right. So we don't want you thinking that, oh, I'm going to use this when I meet a stranger. Sure, we're equipping you with a lot of knowledge of what you need to do when you meet somebody for the first time or start, a conversation, because those are often the toughest things for us, right, to do, where we need to talk to somebody new or strike a new conversation. We're going to train you on that, but you'll see that the principles apply by and large, right, to it. Now, the importance of good conversational skills, I think we've covered this enough. Connecting with others through conversation and small talk play an important social function in our society. Good conversational skills are important for your social or personal life as well as career development. We just said this. Being able to have good conversations can help you make new friends, build your network, and strong relationships with people around you. So this is just good formal language for what we just said. Right now, what have we done here? We have divided the topic of conversations into two broad parts, right? Which is small talk, right? We know, a lot of us know what small talk means, and deep talk, right? So small talk is light, informal conversations. Um, Small talk is usually very short, dis- or discussing topics on a superficial level, and I'll give you an example of what this means. And one may engage in small talk with a colleague or a client before getting to business, okay, at a networking or social event, while talking someone you don't know very well. Right now, let's try to understand small talk in simple words. um, Typically, if you are going for a business meeting or even doing one over video chat, And if you're doing a business meeting, you typically start the meeting with some small talk and not the business end of what you're going to talk about. And this is especially true with clients. This is especially true with people that you don't speak to on a day-to-day basis, right? And what would that small talk probably look like? The small talk would look like saying that, hi, how are you? It's been long since we've met. And then he'll say, oh, yeah, 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 it's been what, 2 years? I'll say, yeah, how's it been? How's work been for the past 2 years? Right? And he'll say, it's been good. How's it been for work? But I'll say, yeah, it's been great. So what are some of the interesting things that you'll have been up to during this time, right? And we'll talk a little bit of back and forth, probably that will last for anything from 5 to 10 minutes at the start of the meeting. And those 5 to 10 minutes, typically, as a salesperson or as a leader going to meet a client, you're putting that in the category of building relationship with that client or that stakeholder, right? And then after those 5 or 10 minutes of that small talk, then you'll jump into business by saying, okay, the reason why I'm here today is I want to discuss project XYZ with you, and the project has been stuck at your end for this much time, and I'd want to talk about this with you, right? So you start with small talk with the client for probably the first 5 or 10 minutes, and then move to the business end of the discussion, right? That's one place where you'd use it. The other place where you use small talk is when you go for a conference, a meeting, when you're just meeting people for kind of brief durations, right? You have probably 5 minutes to just introduce yourself, talk to them very quickly, and you don't really get into deep conversation, or you don't get into a long conversation with them. A classic example of when we make small talk is if you're stuck in the lift with someone, right? At home or in office, and you probably know the person by face, and then you probably just smile at the person and you'll say, hi, how are you? And he'll say, yeah, fine, I'm fine. And then you'd say, yeah, it's been raining very heavily. That's if you see that he's wet. So it's raining very heavily. You'll say, yeah, it's been raining, it's been such a nightmare. Traffic has been so bad. And then I'll say, yeah, yeah, traffic has been that bad. So your classic example of small talk, what it is what you do in a lift with somebody, right? Or at the start of a business meeting, or very quickly at a party where you just meet somebody, talk to them a little, and probably then move on to the next person, right? In certain occasions. So yeah, that would be the way small talk would be defined, as light, informal, like the length of the conversation would define what small talk is. Yes, Arunima.
I thought I had a question here, which we have of
Yes.
course already discussed, but I figured it's a good idea even to discuss it online.
Mhm.
Um, I, for the longest time,
Yeah.
believed that small talk was usually made with people you don't know very well. So your
Yeah.
clients, where you don't know them on a personal level, or
Yeah.
again with your neighbors who you just run into the lift now and then.
Yeah.
But what I've come to realize while researching this topic is that even someone like you and me, who know
Yeah.
each other pretty well,
Yeah.
we could also have small talk.
Yeah.
So is that something you could explain a little bit? How could someone who know each other, how can they also engage in small talk?
Yeah, in terms of how exactly we will get through while we're going through the content, I think that'll be a good indicator of how exactly. But I think the point that you made is exactly what I want to say. Small talk is largely defined by the duration of the conversation.
Hmm.
It could be with anyone, right? The only
Hmm.
difference is that if you and me kind of interact on business on a day-to-day basis, typically
Hmm.
when we do a Zoom call, I don't find the necessity to do the small talk with you, and we'll
Hmm.
probably jump straight to the business end of what we need to discuss. We'll just say, hi, what's up? And you'll say, yeah, good, good. And then we'll go on, right? So that's not really small talk. But if I probably did a conversation with you, although we work with each other so closely, if I did a conversation with you 1 month down the line and we didn't
Hmm.
speak in that time, I'd start the conversation by saying, hey, what's happening? And then you'd really be like, oh, and then I'll say, oh, this is happening. Okay, come on. Then we'll probably talk for 10 minutes, and then we'll move on to the business end of what we have to do, right?
Correct.
So it doesn't necessarily, you don't only do it with people that you don't know, you do it with everyone. And it's usually that a short conversation or what you do at the start
Duration.
before. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Now,
clear.
a deep talk is more meaningful conversations, which runs deeper than small talk. The duration of deep talk is longer than small talk, naturally, thus allowing one to ask more questions and discuss the topic in detail if there is a certain topic that you're talking about. And deep talks and conversations help you get to know the other person better, right? So small talk won't necessarily help you get to know the person better and build a very strong relationship or rapport with them, but it's something in a way that it's the oil that greases social life in a way, right? So that's what you need to do when you're stuck with somebody in a lift. You don't want to come across as grumpy, or if you just bump into somebody at a in your cafeteria when you get back to work, you don't want to come across as grumpy, right? And somebody that's a rude person that doesn't talk, and that's why your small talk becomes very important in that situation. But if you want to build the relationship, the rapport, if you're going to sit and have lunch with somebody for 1 hour, you need to know how to do deep talk, right? So that's the basic difference between these two. The principles of both more or less are the same, right? So it's not that the principles change dramatically because of small or deep talk. Now, why do people choose not to engage in conversations, right? Number one, they can't speak clearly, or they can't put their thoughts easily into words. Very often this happens because they don't know the language well. If they feel that they need to talk in English to a certain person, they feel that they don't know that well, so they're very scared to make conversation. They feel inferior, and very often they feel inferior because if they're talking to somebody that's far more senior to them in office, right? Or somebody in their personal life that they deem to be high on status, right? They will kind of tend to feel inferior and therefore not choose to engage in conversation with that person. Of course, they're afraid that people may judge them if they engage in conversation, so that's another reason why they don't do it. And more often than not, the biggest reason why we don't engage in conversation is because we keep comparing ourselves to others, right? And that's what makes us scared to have conversations, because we think, oh, this guy is so funny when he speaks, and this guy has such a good vocabulary when he speaks, and this guy is so charming when he speaks, right? So we're constantly drawing those comparisons with other people, and that kind of blocks us from making conversation, or scares us from making conversation with people. I hope by this point all of y'all are like, this is a damn important skill that we need to master, right? Now, how do you go about doing this? Let's get to that. So what are some of the things that you can do while starting a conversation? So this is especially true in business settings, but as Arunima threw some light on, and you can come later and throw some light on what we discussed on social media as well. That'll be interesting for people to know. But especially in business scenarios, this becomes important. Okay, so a great preparing yourself. So that's the first point. A great conversationalist is one who can talk about anything. If you have good general awareness, it becomes easier to engage in conversation, right? This is the first truth that I think all of us need to keep in mind. Now, how do you improve your general awareness? Keeping up with major news stories and current events. And please, for heaven's sake, do not get your news from WhatsApp and WhatsApp forwards. That's like the worst place to get any kind of news from, and to think that you have general awareness. मैं literally पाँव पढ़ता हूँ, WhatsApp की news मत पढ़ना, ठीक है? Because the junk that gets forwarded, and if you start believing that junk, the kind of conversation that you're going to make with people is just downright stupid and silly, because you're going to think that you're equipped with general knowledge when you're not. Today, the news has become so unreliable that even if you go to sources like NDTV or BBC, you still can't trust the news. And maybe this is an age old problem, right? Mark Twain very famously said, he said, if you read the newspaper, if you don't read the newspaper, you are uninformed. And if you read the newspaper, you are misinformed. So Mark Twain said this, I don't know what, 50 years back, right? So it seems like it was a problem there as well. But now with WhatsApp and all, it's a bigger problem. However, try to get your news from reasonably reliable sources so that you broadly know what's happening in the world. You don't need to be an expert on each and every issue. And please don't even think you're an expert on each and every issue just because you read 2 articles on coronavirus, right? You don't really know anything about it, or elections for that matter, right? You don't really know anything about it. So don't act like you know anything about it, or what Modi needs to do and how he needs to run the government, right? We're struggling to run our own houses. Let's not think about what Modi needs to do to run his government, right? So don't think just because you read a little bit of news that you know stuff. Be humble enough to know that you barely know anything, but it's still important for you to have that know-how. Now, there's a beautiful quote which says, every person must know everything about something and something about everything, right? I'll repeat it. Every person must know everything about something and something about everything. What this means is every person must really be an expert on one or a few issues, right? Really be an expert in that. So if you're a chartered accountant, even within chartered accountancy, maybe it's indirect tax that you're a real expert at. Nobody knows that subject better than you in India. That's the kind of expert you need to be, irrespective of where you are in the country. But you also must know something about everything, right? A little bit of knowledge, not too much, but you can't act like you know much. That will make you a stupid conversationalist, right? So keep up with the major news stories and current affairs, keeping up with pop culture. Pop culture is a major conversational kind of topic, right? What movies do you like? What are you watching on Netflix? What books are you reading? What music are you listening to? It doesn't matter what age you are. I think you need to know a little bit about pop culture. If you don't know who Beyonce is, you're in trouble, right? If you're talking to a younger person, or if you don't know who, I don't know, Zayn Malik is. Arunima, Zayn Malik, good example, right? You're going to find it unable to talk to younger people, I think, right? So keep up with pop culture, and of course brushing up your knowledge on a few topics outside your direct area of work, right? So tomorrow, if you're a chartered accountant that specializes in indirect tax, you're likely to go to a lot of conferences connected to chartered accountancy, right? So even if you're a specialist at indirect tax, know a little bit about direct tax, know a little about, say, I don't know, GST, know a little about kind of international taxation, so on and so forth, right? So have a little bit of knowledge around those areas as well, because then if you're conversing with your peers, you know everything about indirect tax, but also have that knowledge that you can talk to them or at least ask questions about certain things, right? Now, um, if you're going to meet a client or specific group of people, go through their LinkedIn or social media. This will help you find common ground and identify cues to build conversation. Arunima, before you come in, I'm going to spend some time on this, okay? So now, this is advice that we would, through all our years of sales training, typically when people meet clients, this is the advice that we give them, right? So if you're going to meet somebody from the steel industry, ensure that before you enter that meeting, because you're going to make some small talk, you're going to do that kind of 5 to 10 minutes of conversation at the start before you get to the business end of what you need to discuss. We tell them to type out steel industry on Google and press on the news button there, right? So news of steel industry, what's the latest that's happening? And then read up on the latest that's happening before you go for that meeting, right? For to a steel industry client. Then it becomes so easy for you to make conversation with that client, because you don't need to tell them that you know anything, but at least you can ask some questions around what you just read. So then you can ask him a question saying that, oh, how are you, sir? How are things going? And he'll be like, oh, okay, they're going okay. I was just reading about the changes that have happened when it comes to steel industry, the raising of taxes that has happened. How has that impacted your business? Right, because you just read it like half an hour back, and you can just ask a question, and he's like, it's been so many big changes because of that, the tax increase that the government has done on that. And then we're like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So has what has happened? Has sales gone down because of that? And be like, yeah, 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 sales has of course gone down, where we formed an association, and where so now you're making small talk with the client, but it's not it's a higher degree of small talk that you're doing, right? You're not making small talk where you're saying, um weather kaisa hai sir. That's okay, you can also do that sometimes. If you're in a lift, a person is drenched, you can say, how's the weather? It seems it's raining a lot, isn't it? So that's good conversation to make if you're in a lift with somebody. But if you want to make slightly more quality small talk with a client, if you read up on his steel industry, at least you can ask 2 or 3 questions. So you're not saying that, oh, I'm an authority on the subject of what's happening in the steel industry, but you have enough knowledge to ask him some questions, right? And then the client is going to walk out of that meeting thinking of you as being a knowledgeable person. He'll think of you as somebody that's taken the effort to understand the steel industry, and he's more likely to treat you with respect, and he's more likely to give you business, right, or have a positive relationship with you, because now he thinks of you as a serious professional that knows the steel industry well enough. That's all that's required, right? And where did it come from? Just a simple practice of writing steel industry, pressing on the news button and reading the first 10 articles as you are traveling for that meeting. And it can have a world of a difference in terms of the outcomes that you will meet. And that's the beauty of how you get better at conversational skills, right? A lot of y'all will think of, oh, you need to be an extrovert to have good conversational skills. I'm assuming that extroverts are slightly better than the introverts, right? Are naturally slightly better than the introverts. Yeah, that's probably right. But if you know that conversational skills are important, you can train yourself through attending this class. You can train yourself by starting to do this simple thing of typing steel industry and going through the news. Right now, again, in a business situation, if you're meeting somebody important, please go through his LinkedIn profile, right? Um, and you probably want to type his name out on Google and see if there's any other news on that person, especially if you're meeting a senior person, an important stakeholder in a company, right? Now, why should you um, go through his LinkedIn profile? Because again, making that small talk and even deeper talk for that matter becomes much easier for you, because in today's world, when you meet somebody, you can, as a matter of fact, it's a sign of respect to tell somebody that, sir, I was just going through your LinkedIn profile. He'll be very happy that you took the effort to go through his profile, right? So he'll be very happy because it's an open profile more often than not. So he says, "Sir, I was going through your profile and I read that you used to work with Yes Bank." And he'll say, "Yeah, I worked there for 3 years." He say, "Yeah, Yes Bank is a big client of ours. We've done a lot of work with Yes Bank." And he's like, "Oh yeah, okay. Who do you deal with then?" We say, "Oh, the person, the learning and development team used to be this guy called XYZ." He'll be like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I know that guy quite well. I've worked with him." I say, "Yeah, we have a long standing relationship with them, and we've done this work with them, and that work with them, and this work with them." Be like, "Oh, okay, that's good. I must check on them," right? So immediately you've built a rapport with that person because you formed or found the common ground that you were looking for. You found that common ground. Why did you find it? Because you went through his profile and you identified those areas that were common. Now, even if you didn't have, hypothetically, that common ground through a Yes Bank being a client, let's assume that it was another kind of client in the banking sector, right? That he had worked with previously. That is probably not our client. Let's assume it's Bandhan Bank, and that we haven't worked with Bandhan Bank, right? As a company, so you can say, "Oh, you come from a banking background." He say, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, I come from a banking." That's great. We work with almost 8 of the top 10 banks in India, and these are all the banks that, oh, okay, so then that again becomes some common ground. You may not have a client in common that he's worked for, but it could be the banking industry. So when you go through a person's LinkedIn profile, it becomes much more easier for you to make conversation with that person because you have some background of it. It could be around his work experience, the nature of his work, the place where he comes from, the colleges that he went to, his what education he's done, tons of stuff, right? So in business environments, um, make sure that you go through industry news, make sure that you go through company news, right? Especially if you're going to meet somebody from a fairly large company, type their name out, see what's happening with that company. Maybe their stock is gone through the roof, right? That's a great conversation to have with somebody, that your company is doing well, right? So that could again be a great conversational starter. And look up the person on LinkedIn. That is a great conversational starter. I can assure you, ladies and gentlemen, by just doing this, you will get far better at making conversation in a business setting than anything else, right? Yes, Arunima, come in.
I've made a couple of notes. One, I thought I'll
Yes.
share a story.
Yeah.
I had once was going to go meet a client
Yeah.
for some content discussion. Then
Yeah.
this was a rather senior person, the gentleman that I was going to meet. And it turns out he had kind of again just looked up our company and
Yeah.
Google sort of my name, and through
Yeah.
which my profile on our website showed up,
Yeah.
in which we all write our own bios, as you're aware. And I had
Yeah.
mentioned something about being a Harry Potter fan.
Yeah.
So when I went to meet this gentleman, the first thing he said to me, and I still remember when I sat down, he's like, "So you're a Harry Potter fan?" And then I said, "Oh, yes." And he told me his daughter as well. My daughter goes crazy for the books and for the movies.
Yeah.
And then that immediately just kind of made me feel like a lot less intimidated,
Yeah, yeah,
because I could almost connect with him, and then it gave me then a sort of a entry point to ask him, oh, how old is your daughter? What is she doing? And then we found out she goes to college and so and so. So again, it made it, and this was a senior person who kind of looked me up. So
yeah,
it works kind of both ways, where
yeah, yeah.
you can look a person up and something will pop up
Mm,
which can give you, which is I've written identify cues to build a conversation, because
yeah,
something will come up either in
yeah,
their LinkedIn or their social media or somewhere, which will give you a point to talk about, and then you can
absolutely.
bond or sort of get along with that person a lot easier.
Yep, yep,
So
yep.
that was something that happened to me.
I want to just
Um,
add something. Don't forget
yeah,
your next point, Arunima, but I want to add something. But what a wonderful icebreaker between two people, right?
correct,
Because one of the things that you want to do as a good conversationalist, you want to break the ice with people almost immediately. You want to make people feel at ease immediately in a conversation. You want to
correct,
build a rapport immediately with people. The sooner you do it, the better it is. You don't want to force it into in on somebody. You don't want to force rapport. Don't want to appear too friendly too soon, and that line
correct.
is often difficult to kind of know. But if something is publicly available about you on our company
Yeah,
website or on your LinkedIn profile, that's information you've put out for the public to see. And if somebody's taken the effort to know that, okay, this woman or this gentleman is coming to meet me, I must know their background so I can talk to them better, build better relationships, and do that's such a wonderful icebreaker, and especially for a
correct.
senior stakeholder, right?
Correct,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
So that was one point. Another point that I wanted to kind of add to is when we talk about brushing up your knowledge on a few topics
yeah,
outside your immediate area of work.
yeah.
So again, this just helps you. It often, not often, but I've met some people who can't really talk about anything beyond their work because
Mhm.
they don't know much beyond their work.
Yeah,
And I think it kind of helps to have, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I
yeah,
think it helps to have a few interests
yeah,
outside your work, because then you either, again, you can talk to people who have similar interests,
yeah,
or you can educate other people about those interests, and again, that's also a great way to have a conversation with someone. So we mutually know someone who's a big history buff,
yeah,
and I don't understand and I don't like history at all, but I enjoy talking about history with this person because
yeah,
they educate me a lot.
yeah,
So then
yeah.
I that's a great way again to bond with someone. So I think
Correct.
beyond, of course, be knowledgeable about your own industry, but know a little bit. So if the AI is the big thing
Yeah,
currently, maybe just knowing a little bit about it might help.
yeah,
That's my feeling.
yeah,
However, I kind of have a contrary. The contrary to that is, just because things are big right now, does it necessarily mean that you should be updated on those things, or you can cultivate your own interests and say that I'm not interested in AI, but I'm interested in these topics. I'd much rather kind of brush up my knowledge here. So which one do you think
correct.
would be a better option?
Arima, it's a great question, and especially from a conversational point of view. And
Hmm.
my answer to this is, of course, each one of us have very natural areas of interest. Like Jeff Bezos
Hmm.
says, you don't choose your passions choose you, right?
Right.
So in most cases, it's impossible to cultivate a passion. You just feel
Hmm.
for something, and sure, you must kind of read up on those areas, watch more stuff on those areas, so on and so forth. However, I think general curiosity is extremely
Hmm.
important.
Got it.
So if something is a buzzword, um,
Hmm.
it's just important to know a little about it. Exactly. Everything about
Understood.
something and something about everything, right? So it's important for you to just read up on that thing, because in the end, Arunama, what tends to happen, a lot of those things tend to accumulate over a period of time for you to
Hmm.
be a great conversationalist, right?
Correct.
So what tends to happen is, if me and my wife do this more often than not, right? So if we watch a movie, and we really like the movie, we're curious to know,
Hmm.
who's the director of this movie, right? Or if it's a biography, we're curious to know, oh, let's read up a little more on this person, on this biography that we just saw. And it's not like we'll
Correct.
probably buy a big thick book on it and read it unless it's a core area of interest to us. But then we'll just read a little on that director, and then we'll find something interesting about it, then we'd probably share it with each other. And those kind of little things keep accumulating over a period of time if you just have if you're interested in stuff,
Correct.
right? So that, I think, curiosity generally and curiosity around even
Mm-hmm.
buzzwords is very, very
Mm-hmm.
important, right?
Got
um,
it.
One of the reasons why people tend to feel old is because they don't keep in touch with what's
Mm.
happening around the world in a way, right? So it's important to know, like, irrespective of what your age is, as to what are young people using,
Mm.
what apps are they using. And it's such an interesting conversation. A lot of the world's top companies, um, the senior management has what they call, what is reverse mentors, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know what reverse mentors is? So the CEO and the board of directors and all these people will have first time employees, probably with 1 or 2 years of experience, as their mentors, because they say that we're probably 40,
Mm.
50 years old and we are not in touch with what's happening on the ground and what young people are doing. So sure, I may find
Correct.
somebody to mentor with my knowledge and experience, but I also need to
Mm-hmm.
reverse mentor and kind of talk to somebody who's probably less than half my age to know what's happening on the ground with young people, what are the buzzwords and stuff. So the world's most highly paid people, the most world's most brilliant people, they actually take the effort to do reverse mentorship to themselves, right? So it's so important. It's so important. There's a very nice
Correct.
quote that says, wisdom is knowing how much you don't know, right? Wisdom is knowing how much you don't know. And a lot of these people who reach the absolute heights, are very aware of how much they don't know, and therefore are constantly
Correct.
willing to learn from anyone and people from all age groups,
Mm.
right? And that's the kind of
Yeah.
curiosity that everybody needs to inculcate if you want to be a good conversationalist, right? You can't literally
Correct.
do it without that. Okay, so point number one, I hope this was clear of what you need to do. Yeah, I had another point that I wanted to share, slightly tongue in cheek, because we spoke about LinkedIn, we spoke about what you do in your kind of professional settings of reading about the company industry, LinkedIn. But as we were discussing, even in, if you're going to go out on a date, Arunima, is that right? So if you're going to go out on
Yes.
a date, and before you go out on a date, and if you're meeting somebody for the first time, or you just probably met a person through a social network, going through that person's social media, of course, assuming that it's either public or he or she has given you access to it, that you've befriended that person on the social media, that probably going through his or her social media posts will give you some insight into that person, right? So if it's a person that shares a lot of quotes, it will give you some insight into what his mentality is. If he's sharing a lot of party pictures, that again is going to give you some idea of what the person is, which will also help you in steering the conversation in certain directions. So even in social settings, if you're going out on a date, right, again the same kind of logic works of going through their social media, assuming that they've befriended you on it, not where you're stalking them in a weird way.
Often I remember, again, I think I met a new friend, and I saw in this person's profile picture, I think on WhatsApp, that they had a
Yeah.
picture of the Eiffel Tower. So it was just such a small thing, but I used that then in a way to build conversation, saying that, oh,
Yeah.
have you been to Paris? I'm assuming
Yeah.
you have. And then I shared the time I'd gone to Paris, and then we talked about the cafes in Paris. And so again, it's just, you can pick up literally a cue from
Yeah.
anywhere as long as you're
Yeah.
a little observant,
Yeah.
and that can help you then identify that common ground between you and the other
Correct.
person.
And I think both in business and personal settings, it's become um, it's become a done thing that you would go through
Hmm.
somebody's like social media before meeting them, right?
Correct.
And a lot of people complain that that takes out the novelty of a conversation. Sure, that could be the possible negative side in a personal equation, that it takes out the suspense out of that kind of thing. But sure, it helps in the conversation, there's no doubt about that, right? So again, that's what you could do in those situations.
I I believe, even in fact, I read this somewhere, and I
Yeah.
don't know if we do it ourselves, but even I think interviewers
Yeah.
go through the candidates' social media
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
a host of reasons. But again, that
Yeah.
also will kind of give you an idea of who this person is. So
Yeah.
everyone does it, and it's all in a way to prepare yourself to get to know that person a little bit
Yeah.
more better, to get a larger glimpse into that person's life.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, guys and girls, if this slide alone is going to help you improve your conversational skills in a big way, right? Now, what are the other things that you can do to start a conversation, right? So, of course, ask a question. The heart of making good conversation is asking questions. So it's not really just the start of the conversation. Even when the conversation continues, asking questions is at the heart. So if you want to take one thing back of, oh, how do I make great conversation from today, be a great questioner, right? And if you can ask great questions, you're going to be a great conversationalist in some way, right? The best way to start a conversation is by asking a other person a question. You can ask for information, help, and opinion, right? So let's go to the next slide and look at what this means. A great way to start a conversation is to ask for information from a person you want to talk to. For example, if you're attending an event or conference, you can ask the person you want to speak to something about the event, right? For example, do you know if the regional director will speak after the opening session, right? So that's something that you can start a conversation with somebody with, right? You're asking for information around that, right? With this, you can take the conversation even further by mentioning something you like about the speakers and so on, right? So then you can, if he says that, and of course, when you speak to another person and you ask the other person, if you start by asking him something like this, you are going to get a cue back from that person in terms of his facial expression or his body language, whether that person is in a way interested in conversing further or not, right? And if you get a clear signal from that person that he's not interested in furthering the discussion, great. You just asked for the piece of information and you carry on. But if you want to talk to that person, you can start with that, and then the conversation can continue from that point onwards, right? So we're just focusing here on how you can possibly start conversations with people in social settings or any settings, social gatherings or social settings, right? Now, the other thing that you can do is you can ask for help. Asking for help can help you start a friendly conversation, but make sure your request is convenient for the other person, right? You don't want to ask somebody for help which is inconvenient for that person, because then you're becoming a pain in their backside, literally, as you start, right? An example of that: could you tell me where this conference room is located, or could I borrow a pen from you? So that's again a good way to start a conversation with somebody, if you want to, right? By asking them for help on something. That help could also be a form of information, right? Now, the next thing is ask for opinion. People love to give their opinions and stuff, right? They absolutely love it. So soliciting other people's opinion shows you value and are interested in what they have to say, right? So solicit people's opinion. When asking an opinion, choose topics relevant to the moment. That's very important, right? Otherwise, you're going to come across as stupid. How do you like the coffee from the new cafe? Right? Are those Nike shoes? Are they comfortable? Right? So that's a great way again to kind of start a conversation with somebody, if you want to, right? And it's as simple. Let's look at an example where you moved into a new society, and you're in the lift with somebody and you've seen this person kind of day in and day out, right? And if you see that they're wearing interesting shoes in the lift, and if you ask them, hey, are those shoes? And they says, yeah. And you say, are they comfortable? They say, yeah, they're comfortable. Do you use them for running? Now you've started a conversation, and then maybe you can go about introducing yourself after that, right? You can do that. But that's what this means, that whether you're in a conference, whether you're in the lift, or whether it's somebody in office, where you can start a conversation like this, right? Now, you can then add statements such as, I've been meaning to buy a pair myself, to keep the conversation going, if you want to keep the conversation going from that point, which I'm assuming you want to if you're starting the conversation on a certain thing, right? Now, this ask an opinion can be on just about like anything. In any situation, you can ask a person, right, for an opinion on it. Yes, Arunima, come in.
I think a
Yeah.
question, when you ask someone a question, is probably the least threatening way to kind of break the ice. Because, of course, a lot of other things work, and we will be sharing a lot of those other points as well. But often if you go up and you'll just introduce yourself, the other person might feel like, okay, what's happening? But often when
Yeah.
you're asking a question for help, or you just ask a question, the other person
Yeah.
almost feels obliged to at least give you an answer. And
Absolutely.
you're going to get a response. In most situations, you'll 99% you'll get a response when you ask a question to another person. And then
Yeah.
you automatically have the entry into
Yeah.
a possible conversation with that person.
Yeah.
So I think a short way of getting into a conversation is a question of any sort of
Yeah.
format or any nature.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's, it's easy, it's simple to do, right? And
Yeah.
that's again one of the things that we've tried doing is everything that you're going to go through this program is something that is, you can do it, right? Now sure, you're going to be a little fearful while doing it if you're not used to making conversation, and you're going to have the butterflies in your stomach in those situations, right? But yeah, these are things which are helpful, right? So the first thing that we said is ask a question. It could be for help, it could be for information, it could be for a person's opinion, right? That's what you can do. Now leverage your environment, which is again partly connected to the last thing, but leveraging your environment is important. You can make a comment based on your observation of the person or the surroundings. You can also add a question at the end of the comment, allowing the person to respond to you. For example, your comments can be based on what the person is doing, the weather, the event hall, the person's cabin, etc. If the person shares your view, you are on your way to an engaging conversation, right? Now, this is just very, very important, leveraging your. Um, okay, so let's look at, yeah. So I'll go with the last one, right? The last one is often something that you do in a business setting, right? Hey, that's a great photo of your family on your desk. How old are your children, right? So if you're meeting somebody, after you say, hey, hi, hello, how are you, and you shake hands, and if you genuinely see a big picture of his family on the table, and it is a nice picture, you could politely comment saying, that's a nice picture that you have, you've put there. You say, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Do you have two kids? He'll say, yeah, I do have two kids. You say, oh, even I have two kids. Right? So immediately that's something that you can start bonding on, because one of the keys of making good conversation is finding common ground, right? And that's what you're looking for, because the minute you find common ground with a person, you build rapport with the person, the relationship starts building from there. Now what's another cue? If you go for a meeting and you find that this person has got a lot of certificates that he's put up of probably courses that he's taken. I hope you put, after you go through this program, you put up the certificate for this program that you have. But yeah, maybe the person has put up a lot of certificates in his room or cabin, and you look at the certificate and you say, oh, that, those are quite a lot of certificates. So are you somebody that's a big learning enthusiast? So that's the kind of question that you can ask. He's like, oh yeah, yeah, I like it. So then what are the courses that you typically end up taking up? So he'll say, oh, I loved Work Better's course on the live one-on-one coaching that I did. That was amazing on communication skills. So I'm like, okay, that's great. What are the other courses that you've done? And he'll say, oh, I'm doing a course on data science. Oh, where are you doing that course from? So there's so much of good, like a good conversation starter, just based on certificates on the wall, or a picture of somebody's family, or some other memento that is there in somebody's room. So you're really you're leveraging or making use of the environment to kind of start that conversation with a person. Right, now look at the others. Did you watch the football game last night? I think our team finally hit their stride. From there, the conversation can go deeper in the game, or a tangential subject such as a different sports team. So it can go from anywhere, but that's how you can start. If you see somebody reading a book, okay, you're reading what is this? Anne Rand. I don't know this author or how you pronounce her name. The
And
Fountainhead is, yeah, Anne Rand. The Fountainhead is one of my favorite books, right? So that's again a good way to start a conversation, where you've leveraged, if somebody's holding that book, and you can definitely, and this has happened, by the way, to me so many times, right? At airports, at bookstores, in offices. Somebody's reading a certain book, and I'm a big reader myself. So I'm like, hey, so do you enjoy reading? And the person like, yeah, I enjoy reading. I'm like, what kind of books do you read? So these are the books that, what are you reading right now? So the person, I'm reading this book. Oh, this is a nice book on personal development. Have you read this book? And that's a great way to start a conversation again with a certain person. If you run into
so,
yes, go on.
sorry, I mean, I just thought a quick,
Yeah,
this is actually something I've said. That's why I put it
yeah,
in.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
at an airport, that's often where you see people reading or doing things. and I saw someone was reading Ayn Rand, and I happened to then just. It wasn't a very long conversation. I think
Yeah.
that person didn't want to talk to me, but
Yeah.
yeah, the same thing. That, oh, I see that you're reading Ayn Rand, and
Yeah.
I love the Fountainhead. So it kind of is an actual example, not
Correct.
made up.
Yeah, yeah. If you run into a stranger in the elevator and you've both just stepped inside from the rain, you can say something like, I hope this wet pattern we've been having stops soon, right? Again, that's something that you can talk about. If a person in the lift seems too tired, you can often say, hey, you had a long day, and the person will say, yeah. And then, if you're in Bombay, you know that there's too much of traffic, so you can say, oh, has it been heavy traffic? And the person will say, it's such crazy traffic, and says, where's your office? And you'll be like, oh, this is where my office is. So this is the road that you end up taking. Again, right? You're leveraging or using the environment to start a conversation with somebody, right? Again, if you're at a party, mention the good music or the great snack table or how great the turnout is, right, of the party. So these are examples, amazing examples that Arunima has put together of how you can use your environment to start conversation, right? Now, everybody loves a compliment. Arunima, wouldn't you agree with that? Everyone loves a compliment, right? So that's often a great way of starting a conversation where you can pay a small and simple compliment. You can also follow up the compliment with a question, allowing the person to respond. Right now, the only thing that you need to be careful of is like gender equations, right? So if you're a man who's complimenting a woman or vice versa, you want to be slightly careful in terms of the kind of compliments that you give somebody, because you don't want that person to feel awkward, right, around the compliment that you give them. And especially in work and business settings, you want to be all the more careful about the nature of compliments that you're giving. You don't want to be crossing a certain boundary of decency, right, or business etiquette with people, right? So be careful about the kind of compliments that you give. But I have realized and noticed, and I've seen this happen so many times, and this is what my wife does wonderfully when she goes for when she's in a social gathering, is she'll just walk up to especially women, and just compliment them on their bag, their dress, their hair, their makeup, the way they're looking. And it's crazy how quickly she ends up striking a great conversation with them, and literally within like 15 minutes, because she paid somebody a compliment, they're like best friends, exchanging numbers, and often making friends from those situations, right? Of doing it. And again, that works even in a business setting, right? So if she goes and there's another woman that's come for the meeting, and she's genuinely wearing probably nice shoes, and you just comment saying you're wearing wonderful shoes, and they are wonderful genuinely, then that's a great conversation starter again for a person, right? But the mistake, don't make the mistake. If she's wearing terrible shoes, don't say you're wearing wonderful shoes, right? Just because you want to start a conversation. And I've known so many people that do that, and then they come across as fake, inauthentic, because the person on the other end also knows that their shoes are not great, right? So you don't want to pull that bullshit with them, right? That's not what they want to do. Be genuine in your interactions with people. If you're genuine, people can tell more often than not when somebody is bullshitting and somebody is being genuine. So you don't want to get into that category of being fake. You can make great conversation by just being authentic, by being yourself, and not being fake, right? So yeah, that's another way to start, by a compliment, as long as it's genuine. So whatever, I like the shirt. Wait, that was a great presentation. How long did it take you to put it together, right? So the compliment doesn't just need to be on an attire look. It can be on a certain work that somebody's delivered, or again, so right, something in their room for that matter. If you go into an office cabin, and the office cabin is really neat and clean and beautifully designed, yeah, say that, oh, you have a nice office. I've seen lots of people entering an office that looks terrible, but they've been trained by somebody that give a compliment to your customer, so they'll just give a compliment and it comes across as so fake. Don't do that, right? That'll backfire on you. So offer a compliment. That's again a good way to do it. Now, another way, of course, is plain and simple. Introduce yourself, right? While this may not be suitable for every situation, it is a straightforward way of showing you are interested in meeting someone. If you just started a new job and have not met someone in another department yet, you can approach them and introduce yourself, right? This is a very kind of direct, old school way of starting a conversation, but important way of starting a conversation, where you just go and say, "Hi, I'm Raj. I'm new to the team and wanted to introduce myself to you." Right? Doing something like this, by the way, if you ask me, is brilliant, right? And especially if you're new in organizations, this shows so much of confidence. This shows so much of that you're at ease with yourself. You're not embarrassed to actually go and introduce yourself. And I put people that do this in very, very high regard for doing this, because joining a new place or being in a new setting often is scary for people, and if you can do this and break that barrier, people look up to you more often than not. So yeah, try doing this. You can then follow up questions about their position or how long they've been in that company. So that's something which is important, right? So if you um, when we get back to regular office in where we're all in office, or we're all in that setting, and somebody is new at the cafeteria, or you're having coffee, and if you meet somebody there in your cafeteria, you can just introduce yourself to them, and then that's a great way of making conversation. And especially, I think a good thing to do is um, you know try to always start with a smile, right? If you make eye contact with somebody, give them a genuine smile, and if they kind of smile back, that's perfect timing for you to go and introduce yourself to someone, right? So the smile plays like a big role in knowing whether the other person is interested in kind of interacting or not, more often than not, right? And sometimes you'll smile and the person won't smile back. Hey, that's okay, no problem, just carry on. Don't have an ego so big that you don't do that, right? And of course, don't go about smiling in a creepy way where you have a huge smile on your face all the time. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about a small positive expression on your face that helps the conversation, right? So introduce yourself. Now, the sixth point of how you can start conversations is offer help. If you find yourself in a position to assist a person you want to talk to, seize the moment and offer them help. Offering help can make you likable and earn the trust of the other person, especially when you show a genuine interest. Can I help you file away some of those binders? Do you need a seat? So any place where you can assist a person, that's amazing in terms of starting a conversation with somebody, right? Nothing better than kind of offering help to start with. From there, you can lead into conversations related to the task, such as what is in the contents of those binders, so on and so forth, right? So from there, you can get into some topic which is related to the help that you've offered that person, and this you can do in just about any setting which is there. Yeah, so a lot of this um, is in a way, you think of these things as probably meeting new people, right? But like Arunima and myself were discussing, even on virtual calls for that matter, say Arunima was sharing an example where she was saying, I need to get on this virtual call, probably two of us have joined 5 minutes earlier this virtual call, which is a call of probably 8 people. And that's a time where you do a little bit of small talk and talk to your colleague that you haven't seen since corona, and you start by saying, hey, what's happening, what interesting projects are you working on, right? So that's a question that you would ask. Asking questions is the key, and they'll say, oh, this is what I'm working on, this is what I'm working on. And of course, you could follow up that up by saying, if she said that, oh, I'm working on a communication skills module, that's the interesting thing that I'm working on for XYZ client of mine, you can say, hey, we just did some really nice content on the subject of conversational skills. If that's one of the things that you have, I can send that across to you, right? So it may not be the way you absolutely started the conversation. So you started with a question, but after that you offered some help where possible, and that will kind of lead your conversation in a beautiful direction. Yeah, yes, Arunima.
This one thing I wanted to point out,
Yeah,
almost on every slide thus far,
yeah,
you have used the word genuine.
yeah.
And I think it's very important whenever you're making conversation, whether you're paying a compliment, whatever it is,
Mm,
it should be a genuine intent to make conversation with that person, or
absolutely.
because if you're genuinely interested in it, then you'll automatically demonstrate curiosity, then you'll
Yeah,
automatically ask the kind of questions you need to
yeah,
ask, and you
yeah,
don't really need then some sort of magic formula
yeah,
in terms of how to have a conversation,
yeah,
because everything will kind of fall into place. I just thought
yeah,
it's important to bring it up because you
yeah.
literally emphasize on that word on every slide so far.
Absolutely. And
Um,
that's it comes, I think it comes from a space of genuine belief,
Correct.
of being authentic, being genuine, being yourself,
Right.
starting from that point, and yet honing your skills, right? Being yourself
Correct.
doesn't mean, being genuine doesn't mean that you don't hone and better on your skills on different things, right? So yeah, so that's offering help is another way of starting conversation. Mention a shared experience. If you want to talk to someone who you know shares something in common with you can always find a topic as a talking point. Your shared experiences make getting along easier, and that aids the flow of the conversation and building of the relationship. For example, Arunima just shared the picture in Paris, right, of that person who had put it up. So that was a shared experience that he and she had, and it became easy for her to have conversation with that person. And so for example, if you work in the Bombay office, somebody else works in the Bombay office, it's a great conversation starter where you say, "How do you like working in the Bombay office?" Because if a shared experience you have, or how do you like working in that department, because if you work under the same broad department, that's something that you can ask. When was the last time you saw our friend Kiran? If you have a common friend, that's in a way a shared experience, right? So that's again a common a good conversational starter if you have some kind of shared experience that you can talk about, right? So again, very very interesting. Um, and of course, finding common topics of interest, this is what you want to do in the end, right? So finding common topics of interest, asking questions, making observations, and paying compliments are great ways to find common ground between you and the other person. Or through your conversations you may discover things like you both grew up playing football, both of you are from Bangalore, both of you are cat owners, so on and so forth, right? So the minute you find some kind of common ground with a subject, that's when the conversation really flows. And once you find a common topic of interest, it becomes easier for you to have long meaningful conversations, since both the people can contribute on a certain thing, right? And I think this last point is very very important, that the reason why finding common interest, common topics of interest, or common ground is so important is that if you want to have a conversation, it needs to be two way. And for a conversation to be two way where both people are contributing, there has to be some kind of common ground which you find, right? That's the kind of ideal way in which conversations happen. However, that said, if you're a skilled conversation, how can I put it? If you're skilled at making conversation, you have the ability to kind of converse with different kinds of people, and you also have the ability to converse on issues that you don't know much about. And that's what this kind of training session is on, right? So sure, try to find common grounds, but in a lot of situations you may not have common grounds with people, and you still need to be good at making conversation, and the rest of the stuff that we're going to discuss with you will revolve around that, right? So if you don't have common grounds, how do you do it, right? But this actually helps a lot. Okay, now what are some great conversation topics? Okay, sure, right, work, career is a great conversation topic. Family, and your background, where you grew up, what school you went to, your education, a lot of that background is a great thing to talk about. Where you're from, the city that you live in, the city that you grew up in, that could come under background or here. What are your passions? What are the things that you like doing? What are the things that you really don't like doing? Sports is often something that people connect on. Travel is something that people connect on, right? Most people like to travel, right? So that's often a good conversation topic. The news, like we mentioned, pop culture, what you're doing for a holiday, or what you did for the one that passed by, again connected to travel. So these are some of the kind of common good conversation topics with people after you start a conversation, right? Now, very very important point. If you don't get this point, you'll fear making conversation, um, and you'll make conversation and have a few bad experience and then won't continue doing it, which will impact your ability to build relationships, right? Not everyone will want to have a conversation with you. Nothing's wrong with you, but still, no, not everybody will want to have a conversation with you, because in the end, conversation is a two player or a multiplayer game, right? You need to have two people. You can't talk to yourself. You're gonna be mad. So in a way, to some degree or the other, both people need to be interested in having a conversation, right? The degrees may vary, but at least there needs to be a certain amount of degree of inclination or interest towards talking. So don't, just because a person is doesn't want to indulge in conversation, don't make it personal, don't make it about you. Sometimes people in a rush, maybe in a rush, stressed out, don't have time to talk. Sometimes people may be hungry, tired, angry, sad, or not in a mood to talk. They're shy and uncomfortable to have a conversation, right? So conversations are multiplayer activities. If the other person doesn't want to participate, you can't force a conversation onto them, right? That's the most irritating thing to do. um, and I keep sharing this with Arunima, right? As somebody that's been a trainer, and if I'm not training, I'm in office the whole day, I'm often talking literally a lot. So by the end of the day, if I've gone out for a training program, and if I've like literally spoken the whole day to a bunch of sometimes 20 people, 50 people, 100 people who have been sitting and listening to me sometimes like for the whole day, like after that, my ultimate nightmare is if I have to give a lift to somebody somewhere, right? That's my ultimate nightmare, because at the end of the day, I'm so tired that I don't want to converse with anyone. I don't want to pick a call. I just want to rest, right? So if I seem kind of standoffish at that point of time, it's not because there's a problem with you. It's just because I am tired, right? So don't take offense there, and be very comfortable with people not be willing to talk to you, right? Be comfortable with that idea, and then you'll again get good at making conversation with people, right? So keep all these things in mind when you're doing that. Okay, yes, Arima, to start with on this section, do you have any other comments, or you think we've covered it well?
No, I think we've done a thorough job.
Yeah, okay. And guys, this is quite a long subject, right? So at this point of time, I would recommend that you pause the video. And if you've not been making notes throughout this kind of, because this is a very technical in a way issue, right? There's lots of solid, concrete, specific points that we've given you of what you can do. But a good idea would be to try to recollect what are some of the main points you've picked up from the discussion so far. So really pause and reflect on that right now, and make a note of all your takeaways so far from this section, right? Arunima is going to put together some lovely learning resources for this. But you know that the notes that you make and the takeaways that you have are all important. So pause the video here, do that before you go ahead in keeping the conversation going, right? Okay, now our second section is around keeping the conversation going. Now, how do you keep the conversation going? And this is a critical part, ladies and gentlemen. Ask pertinent follow up questions. Okay, conversations are all about give and take. This is achieved through asking questions. Okay, I mentioned this at the start. One word or two words, if you want to be a great conversationalist, if you want to master the art of conversation, be amazing at asking questions. Okay, now think of yourself as an interviewer. Ask the other person any questions around the topic of conversation that you are genuinely interested in, right? Don't worry about your questions coming off as silly or stupid. Okay, now you don't want to be an interviewer like an Arnab Goswami, right? That's not what we're trying to say. But your basic mindset, if you want to be good at conversations, is to be like a decent interviewer, right? Where you really want to ask questions and get to know about the other person. Because, like Dale Carnegie, he said very famously, he said, you'll make um, more friends in 2 months by letting other people talk than you will in 2 years by trying to talk about yourself, right? Again, I'll repeat that you'll make more friends in 2 months by letting other people talk than 2 years by by talking about yourself to them, right? So people love, in a way, talking about themselves. They love giving their opinions on stuff. So if you ask questions to them, that's, you can make a conversation of on just about anything and everything based on that, right? If you remember one of the earlier examples we gave around the steel industry was the same logic, right? You're not an expert on the steel industry. It's just you have a client that you're meeting from that industry. If you read enough about it, you'll have enough of material to ask questions. And if you can just ask questions around it, you come across as knowledgeable. And through the process, you can also learn something from that interaction from the person on the other end, right? So that's what makes it cool to do it. Okay, now ask pertinent follow-up questions. If the person gives you a detailed answer, you can ask more questions to discuss the topic in further detail. Alternatively, use the answers to segue in another direction. Okay, now this is a very, very important point, guys. This is the key to good conversation. Okay, now look at what has happened. You've met a person, so you have asked them a question, right, on a certain thing. Now he's given an answer to your question. After he's given an answer to the question, you can ask a follow up question connected to the answer that he's given you, right? So you can ask a question connected to the answer that he's given you, and then he in a way gives another answer here, right? And then again you can ask another question connected to this answer that he gave you. Right, now you're done with this topic one, in a way of talking, right? So you exhausted one topic, and then in a way you can ask him question on topic two. You ask him question one on that topic two, and then he gives an answer, and maybe you go deeper into it. So in a way, good conversation is where you ask a question, he gives an answer, then you ask probably a follow-up question, you give an answer question. So this is what how a good conversation. You're exhausted with topic one, then sometimes then you'll jump on to topic two, right? If you're done with this topic. Sometimes even if you're not done with this topic, you can just mention to the other person that, hey, you know what, you said this thing, I just thought of something else, and then you kind of jump onto another topic and kind of talk about that, right, that other topic, and then from there possibly you'll pick up on a cue which will become topic three for you to talk about. So that's what you do. So read this line again. If the person gives you a detailed answer, you can ask more questions to discuss the topic in further detail. Alternatively, use the answer to segue into another topic. So from this answer that you gave, there's no more, you move on to a new topic altogether. If the answer doesn't allow you to get into further detail, ask yourself the same question, same original question, and give an answer. This will keep the conversation going. So yeah, very simply, if you want to make great conversation, like ask the person a question, see what kind of answer he gives you. Maybe you ask another question to that, and once he's done with that, maybe you answer that question yourself, right? So for example, if I'm talking to Arunima and if I ask her saying, um, hey Arunima, oh Arunima, do you want to come on screen?
Yeah.
So if I ask Arunima saying, Arunima, what are your favorite movies? What are some of your favorite movies?
Midnight in Paris.
Okay, and
Um, The Martian.
okay, and any Hindi movies that you
Um,
like?
Dil Chahta Hai.
Dil Chahta Hai, right? Okay, you know what my favorite movies are? So my favorite movies are, I like Rang De Basanti. That's my favorite movie, right? I like that movie a lot. Again, I like Dil Chahta Hai. That's a movie that we have in common. I really love Dil Chahta Hai. And I like actually a gangster flick called Satya, right? Okay, now I want to pause this interaction. So here what I did was I asked Arunima a question. She answered the question, and she didn't ask me what are your favorite movie. That's a nice thing to do, and she would have done it in a bit because she knows how this goes. But even if she didn't, then I asked that question to myself, saying, what are my favorite movies, right? And the same thing you can do for anything. If I don't know Arunima, and if I ask her saying, hey, so what kind of work do you do, and then you give me an answer for the work that you do, and then I can get into more details into that. And then once I finish getting into the details of that, then I can say, oh, this is the kind of work I do, right? So then you ask that question to yourself and you gave details to that other person. And that is the key to make kind of wonderful conversation with someone, right? Yeah, Arunima,
Yes.
okay, like let's just kind of demonstrate questions, right? In terms of how you can use them to make conversation. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so the setting really here is that that we kept speaking about the airport, right? So let's assume that like I meet you at an airport and like we're sitting right next to each other, and for some reason we start talking to each other, right? Or we've
Mhm.
met each other like vaguely at a friend's party, so we recognize each other by face, and then I'm sitting next to you and I talk to you, right? So let's start a conversation. So I'll ask, so Arunima, what do you do?
I'm a content developer for a training company. What about
So
you?
um, I actually work. I have a restaurant of my own.
Oh, what kind of cuisine do you serve there?
We serve largely Indian cuisine is what we serve, and the restaurant is in Goa. So we serve Indian cuisine, and we have a little bit of Goan cuisine as well.
Oh, that's interesting.
What kind of content do you develop? What do you mean by content development? I've not really. I don't know what it means.
So what we do is we are a soft skills training company. So we train corporates on soft skills and behavior. And my role there is essentially to create the content that is taught to these corporate professionals.
Okay.
Um, that's essentially what I do.
Okay. So I vaguely know what soft skills means, but what do you mean by soft skills? What are the kind of topics that you train in?
So topics like communication skills, leadership, sales, anything essentially, any of these softer skills that you require to be successful at the workplace.
Okay. And you how like how do you conduct these sessions with the corporates?
Well, we usually conduct them in classrooms where we have a class of about 20 to 25 people. We also conduct them online on Zoom. So you can either have a classroom training or you can have a virtual training. Yeah, so that's the
Correct.
format in which we
And
conduct them.
what's the duration usually of these trainings?
It could depend. It could you could have trainings which last for 90 minutes. You could have them go over a span of 3 days. It entirely depends on what we need to teach and how long we need to teach it for, depending on what the client wants us to do.
Oh, okay. And who are some of your top clients?
We work with a lot of banks like HDFC, XYZ. Then we also work with a lot of IT companies. We work with actually a whole lot of clients all over
Okay.
the industry.
Okay. Okay. And how long have you been working at Work Better for?
I've been working there for almost 4 years.
Oh, okay. Do you enjoy working at Work Better?
Yes, I do. I do.
What is it that you like about working at Work Better?
I, of course, my job is right up my alley in
Mm,
terms of what I've chosen as a profession, and the place is great. Our office is wonderful. The people I work with are great. We have a very open sort of feedback open culture, and it's one of those places where people love to party, people love to work hard. Everyone's really polite.
mm.
I don't think you can really ask for a better culture.
Oh, okay. And how many people are there at Work Better? Is it because this is a company that I haven't heard of before? So how many people work at Work Better?
We have about 70, 75 people.
Okay, okay. And what is the kind of work they do? What are these 70, 75? Are they trainers that work here or?
No, so we have people. We've got business people who bring in business from the clients, and we've got, of course, content people like myself who create the content for these trainings. And we've
Mm,
got a project management team which looks after all the logistics of the trainings.
mm,
We don't, like, since you mentioned trainers, we don't have our own trainers in house, but we work with a lot of freelance trainers. So yeah, so primarily I think the three verticals you'll find are your BD people, your content, and your project management, and of course you've got your support system as well,
mhm.
IT, HR, and accounts, and so on.
Okay. Okay. So cut. Okay. I'm going to cut the conversation. I'm going to come out of role play zone. So if anybody observed this entire conversation, all that I did was ask questions, right? And I just asked questions. She gave me an answer. Then I asked the next question. And we could literally go on and have a half an hour conversation where I don't do anything but just ask you questions connected to just logical questions connected to to what you said. Now, one of the keys, which of course we talk about later, but since we did a role play right now, it's important for people to know that you can't be scared to, in a way, look stupid, right? You can't be scared to look stupid. You can't act like you know stuff, you'll never be able to make great conversation if you act like you know stuff, right? So if you don't really know what soft skills means, don't act like you know it. Just say, yeah, so what exactly does soft skills mean? Right. Another question that I would ask Arunima, so content, so what exactly do you do? Right, you said that you put the materials, so do you actually work on a presentation? And then she'd probably say, yeah, I work on this presentation and I put it together. And then what happens with that presentation? So you'll make great conversation if you're not scared to look silly, right? There's a beautiful quote that says, he who asks is a fool for 5 minutes, he who does not ask is a fool forever, right? So don't be a fool forever, have the curiosity and be humble enough to do it, and you can have a beautiful long conversation by just asking question after question, right? Now, if I finished asking my bunch of questions to her, and which I could literally go on for the longest time, right? Just question after question, maybe then I turn the attention to myself if she doesn't ask me questions, right? So it says, okay, let me tell you a little bit about my work, right? I run a restaurant in Goa, which, has Indian food. This is when I started it. These are the kind of people that work with me. This is why, so I could go on talking, and then she'd have questions, and we have a lovely conversation where we know nothing about each other's world, and it's still so easy for us to talk about stuff. So the key to good conversation, as you saw in this role play, is your ability to ask questions, right? Nothing is more important. Yeah, and this point again is a very important point. If the answer doesn't allow you to ask further details, ask yourself the same original questions and give an answer, right? Now, Arunima, come back online. Now, in a setting where, say, both of us have just met at an airport, we can have a 1 hour conversation extremely easily, right? Because I could, like, ask you so many questions about your work,
Correct.
like just on work, I would ask you those questions. Then you would possibly ask me those questions, or I'd tell you something about my work. And then I could easily ask you from that point onwards, saying, hey, so what's your educational background?
Correct.
Right? So where did you go do your schooling? And you'll say, oh, this is, oh, okay. And then maybe something common there. And then you say, oh, this is your educational background. Then I'll say, this is my educational background, right? Connected to this. So like I could ask you probably, so where do you live? Do you live in Bombay? So you say, yeah. So what kind of things do you do for fun in Bombay? Right? So again, we finished work, we finished education, then we can get into kind of hobby zone, right? And there's
Correct.
so much to talk about there in terms of hobby, and that can go into so many different areas. So if you're good at asking questions, and if you know those topics of conversation that we shared earlier, you're golden. It's easy, right, for you to do it.
I'd like to add something here.
Yeah, sure.
So again, I think the list of topics that we've given are really great, safe topics that you can have a lot of
Yeah,
conversation, detailed conversation, because there's so many
yeah,
questions you can keep asking, right?
yeah, yeah,
Um, that being said, again, I don't think anyone should mistake it as a checklist.
yeah, yeah,
Saying that, okay, if I meet someone, the first question I need to ask them
yeah,
is, okay, what do you do, or where do you
yeah,
work? Because
yeah,
again, we've also given you
yeah,
multiple sort of entry points, which is asking any question regarding the surrounding, paying a compliment. So for example, once when I was traveling, I was
yeah,
seated next to a young man, and we were both on a flight, obviously going to the same place, which is Hyderabad. So instead of asking me, where do you work, who are you, any of those questions, he asked me, oh, do you live in Hyderabad?
yeah,
And I said no. And then so through our conversation, from there we kind of went on to discover, oh, you live in Bombay, so do I. Then from there he asked me, what do you do? And then I asked him what
correct.
he does,
Yeah, of
and we
course.
discovered he's a physician, and it just went on and on. So my point
Correct.
is, there is no checklist.
Yeah,
The topics are great topics to as sort of a fallback if you don't really know what to talk on.
yeah,
They are great topics that you can lean on.
yeah.
That being said, also kind of depend on the surroundings, and you can sort of ask question on basically anything,
Absolutely.
as
But
long as
but
you're giving, yeah,
yeah, having said that, Arunima, sure, what you're saying is absolutely right. We're in full agreement with that. But I also feel that a lot of the topics that we've put together and given them are very meaty topics to talk on,
correct,
right?
Correct.
So of course you could talk about 100 things depending on your surroundings of what you see. You could be at an airport and you could see a McDonald's stand and you could start talking about the ills of fast food in a way, right? So this
Correct.
like literally anything that you can talk on. But if you want to have meaty topics, I think the meaty
Yes.
topics are right there, right? Which is
Yes. Absolutely.
about your work, about your family, about your background, about your interests, about your hobbies, about where you stay connected to that, so on and so forth, right? So those are the
Correct.
directions that you go in. And truth be told, when you're having this conversation and when we were having this conversation, it still didn't go to the levels of depth that you can take a conversation in,
Yes.
right? So a level of depth that you could like take a conversation in at times depending on the comfort level is saying. So after you get to know a little more about that, so what's next on your what's your next work wise goal, right? What do you want to do there, right? And that's taking the conversation slightly deeper in that direction, right? Just you can keep taking the conversation deeper and deeper depending on how that thing is going. And but again, it's all questions. You master questions, you master conversational
Correct.
skills, right? Okay, now examples of generating great questions. We've already done a role play and shown you a good practice to improve your questioning skills is to think of yourself as an interviewer, which we've discussed, and generate as many questions that you can think of for a specific topic. For example, we just showed you this role play. What do you do? How long have you been doing it? What made you get into this line of work? Do you enjoy what you do? What have been some of the highlights of your career? So these are the questions that we actually didn't even discuss, right, Arunima and myself, and still it was quite a lengthy conversation. If we went into these, we could literally have a 1 hour conversation, just me asking these questions to you, right? And that's so interesting. So you can really pause and read these things again to get that sense. Now, this is your exercise. It's a wonderful exercise, right? Which you're going to take back and discuss with your coach, and this is going to help you get better at conversation. Come up with all the questions. This is the key. All the questions you can think of for the following topics, right? So exactly like we just did a role play for you on the topic of work. Now you are going to try to generate as many questions as possible on the topic of travel, right? And make a list right now. Pause the video here and do that. Make a list of all the possible things that you can ask somebody on their family, right? Make a list of all the possible things that you can ask them on the topic of movies, right? Of what you can do. And the key here is to generate quantum, right? Because that is really going to exercise your brain in terms of generating those questions. Now once you do that, you will know that on travel I can ask the person so many questions, and plus based on the answers that he gives, I can ask some further questions or that, or make comments on that, right? I can add my own two bits to that. So that gives you so much of room to make conversation with a person, right? So pause the video here and generate as many questions as possible on these three and take them back to your coach, right? And do that. Now, be a great listener. That's the second thing that you need to do if you want to be a if you want to be great at making conversation. Active listening will help you pick up on more topics to branch out the conversations. Hey, if you're not going to listen to the person carefully, how are you going to pick up the cues to either make comments on, which is give your opinion on, or like or ask further questions? How are you going to do both? It's not going to happen unless you're totally paying attention to that person. There's a very nice quote that said, you must pay attention, give whatever you're doing or whoever you're with the gift of your attention. I love that line. I shared that during the listening class, right? Give whatever you're doing or whoever you're with the gift of your attention. Listen to people like they're the only thing in the room, right? That's the way you need to listen to them. Like nothing is there. Even if you're at an airport, right? And if you're talking to somebody, you need to listen to that person like there's no one else around. That's the kind of fierce attention that you need to pay in a conversation, right? That's how interested you need to be in it, right? So active listening will help you do that. Demonstrate curiosity about the other person and the topic of conversation. We've said this earlier, the curiosity is the key. Be genuinely interested in what they have to say. Be open to learning and understanding new things, right? Give full attention to that person. So one of the things, if you want to be a good listener to somebody, please keep your cell phone away, right? Because you can't be a good listener to somebody when you're going to be busy looking on your phone, or your phone is going to disturb you every 2 minutes. That's not a good way to make conversation, right? Put your phone on silent, keep it away so that you're fully engaged in that conversation. And looking into your phone and again while making it is impolite, is mannerless, or even constantly asking them to forgive you and look into your phone. That kind of breaks the flow of the conversation as well, right? So you don't want to do that as far as possible. Now the next point, don't be a passive listener. Be open to speak your mind. Share your candid and honest feelings and opinions. Contribute to the conversation, right? So that's what you need to do. Person says something, you can feel free to share something with them as well. You don't just need to listen to them. If you're a good conversational, you want to add your 2 bits, but you don't want to add your 2 bits just for the sake of adding your 2 bits, right? That's something which is, again, you will sound stupid if you just want to say something for the sake of it. If it's genuinely something that you want to say, please say it, right? And the other thing, if you want to be a great conversationalist, we were having a discussion on this. If you want to be a great conversationalist, you need to have the ability to withhold judgment, right? That's what you need to kind of have. And that's the key. If you actually go back and think about who are the people that you love conversing with, love talking to, these are the people that hold judgment back, right? Now what does that mean? I'm saying this point in jest, I'm saying it as a joke, right? But if I'm talking to Arunima at the airport and Arunima says something as absurd as saying, yeah, I murdered that guy, right? And I murdered that guy. That's what she says, right? So, I should be, yeah, how could you murder them? Oh, that's interesting. Like, why did you murder that person, right? So you really off a topic which is as shocking as somebody telling you that you murdered somebody in a real life situation, you must run from there. But you get my point of what I'm trying to say, right? That you kind of withhold your judgment on somebody telling you something really absurd or something which is really kind of sensitive. And if you just hold your judgment and just say, okay, kind of tell me more about it, that is what great conversationalists do, right? If you think of it, actually some of the best conversationalists are counselors. They've been trained on how to make good conversation. Of course, they do it entirely through asking questions, and the beauty of their job is that they are supposed to withhold judgment irrespective of what you say. You could say the most horrendous, horrible thing that you feel about a certain thing, and they will still withhold judgment. So just to take that thing. So if you're having a conversation with somebody and one of your friend tells you that, if they say that about their husband, if they say that, oh, sometimes I just want to like pour water on his head, right? He upsets me so much. And you can just, that's interesting. Why is it that you feel like that, right? And then they will go on to this. Unless you say, how can you say something like that, and that's a wrong thing to say, and you shouldn't be like that, then immediately you're judging that person, which makes them uncomfortable to speak on that topic further. And you want to withhold your judgment, ask questions, get them to talk more, so that even when you kind of give your advice to them or give your suggestion to them, if it's called for, you will give more nuanced advice to them. You will give more kind of usable advice to them, because you didn't jump to judgment immediately based on the first thing that they said. You really kind of took the effort to understand and get deeper into what they were saying, and then you made a comment on it, which will be far more valuable. I read somewhere recently where they said people that often jump to give advice often give terrible advice, because in their excitement of giving advice, they don't understand the issue properly at hand. And if you want to understand the issue properly at hand, you need to be good at making conversation, which is you need to be good at listening, which means you need to be good at holding back your judgment when a person says something which is sometimes even borderline crazy, right? So that's what you need to do. So these are some of the important points of being a great listener that will make you a good conversationalist, right? Now, pause the video here, and this is an exercise that you need to do. What are some of the things that you will start doing in order to demonstrate great listening skills, right? You already have points from your listening session, hopefully. But yeah, especially from what you just learned here to make better conversation, what are the 3 to 5 points that you're really going to take up in order to be a good listener that will help them? So pause the video, make a note of it, take it back to your coaching session. Right now, the third part, okay, add details to your answers. This is again so important if you want to get good at making conversation. Conversing it's all about sharing, right? If you don't share, the other person will find it more difficult to add to the conversation. Don't just give one word replies to the other person's questions. Instead, aim for two sentence answers. This is such a beautiful point. A good strategy is to answer the question and then add a why. This way, you're giving the person a deeper glimpse. So, what does this mean? Right? Conversing is all about sharing. If a person asks you a question, if you just give blunt or short or one word answers to them, it becomes very difficult to make conversation, right? Because how many questions is the other person going to ask? And if you just keep giving one word answers, it becomes difficult for them. So, therefore, when a question comes to you from the other side, you want to give the answer and you want to give more than just the one word so that the conversation kind of flows beautifully from there on, right? Now, example, if a question is asked you, have you tried the popcorn at the snack table? It's so good, right? If somebody says that to you, instead of saying, yes, I've tried the popcorn, or no, I haven't, you can add, popcorn is basically the only reason I go to the movies. I've seen a lot of mediocre movies just to eat popcorn because movie theater popcorn is just the best, right? So the question was, have you eaten the popcorn? You could have so easily said yes or no, but that wouldn't be a good way to add the detail that is required to make good conversation. So this is the detail that you added, right? Yes, I have it. You have eaten it. Actually, the only reason I come to the movies is to eat that popcorn because I love that popcorn, right? So that's in the reason, the why that we gave you, right? An example of that. Now that the person can agree with you or disagree with you, or ask you about a recent movie you've seen, they have a lot of options since you've revealed something about yourself than just say yes or no, right? So think about it. You said pop- popcorn is, the best. Movie theater popcorn is the best. So somebody can in a way debate with you on whether movie theater popcorn is the best, or which movie theater popcorn is the best. This theater you get better popcorn, or that theater you get better popcorn. Or you can say, no, there's this shop that gives you better popcorn than this. So you've given yourself and the other person scope to talk about that. Or the person could say, no, movie theater is absolutely rubbish. Or you can say, what are some of the mediocre movies that you watch? Let me tell you a few good ones, right? So see how you given scope for the conversation to go on. Now the question, do you have a hobby? Right now, if you say yes, I like hiking, and if you stop it here, you can't really make good conversation. But if you say, yes, I like hiking, it allows me to just switch off and enjoy the mountains. Plus, it's great exercise, right? Now, this is such a beautiful way of kind of furthering the conversation because you've added the detail. Okay. Now, interesting topic. Body language and tone of voice. If you want to be good at conversations, you need to know the right body language. So to start with, like we mentioned, start your discussions, and throughout the discussion, not throughout, but at least start your discussion always with maintaining a positive facial expression. That becomes important. When you're talking to a person, maintain eye contact with that person. Again, we said don't look into the phone. You can't stare into person in a weird way, but you know what to do, right? Just make eye contact when somebody's speaking to you. We've discussed this in the body language part, but when you're talking to a person, lean into the conversation so that you it shows a certain amount of interest that you have in the subject. We've discussed the fourth point as well. Mirror the person's body language. Mirroring makes the other person feel as if you're present in the moment and have the same interest in the conversation. So we said, how should you listen to another person? Your facial expression must reflect the emotion they have. I've given you examples of Amitabh Bachchan. I've given you examples of all these people. Amitabh Bachchan during KBC, right? How does he listen? What's his body language? When a person is happy, he has a happy face. When a person is telling him a sad story, he looks in a way unhappy, right, about it. So he's reflecting or mirroring the body language of the other person, so that helps two people connect, right? Now, when you're of course speaking to somebody, speak in confident, and energetic and polite tone to somebody. If you do that, and if you speak to somebody in that confident, energetic, polite tone to somebody, people like talking to you, right? If you don't have that politeness, then people don't like talking to you. When you're listening, we've discussed this again in the topic of listening. Nod your head when you're listening to a person. If you're on the phone, and even in person, when you're listening, say okay. You could also say, that's interesting. You can just, add that bit to that. Oh, that's interesting. That's something nice. I get what you're saying. So just saying, ha, yes, that's interesting. Those are the verbal and non-verbal nods that you're doing to another person. And of course, observe the other person's body language. Use it as a cue to either build on the conversation or to change the topic, right? So people that are good at making conversation are always observant of the other person's body language, of whether they're looking bored, whether they're looking interested, what are they finding interesting, and you can often find the cues there to know what to do. And that's the reason why you need to be all there during the conversation, and you need to maintain the right body language, observe the body language, and the right tone of voice while speaking. Right now, again, pause the video here, make a note of all the points that you have, that you've learned from the previous section. The more the merrier, because otherwise you're going to forget all your learnings, and there's no point just attending these classes if you're not going to actually make copious notes and keep going through the notes that you've made. Right now, if you paused, now let's talk about ending a conversation. When others want to end the conversation, don't feel bad when somebody is finished having a conversation with you. Someone leaving a conversation doesn't mean that it was bad. Here are some cues to look for, that someone is ready to end a conversation. They're not making eye contact, but are instead looking around. They say, it was nice to meet you, it was nice to talk to you. So that's a good cue to say, okay, I'm done with this conversation, I need to go on. Where their body language is looking closed, right? All of us know what closed means, where they're basically looking through their body language. They are in a way demonstrating that they're not interested in having the conversation. Let the person let the person know that you enjoyed the conversation. We missed a point. Let the person know you enjoyed the conversation, and exchange the contact details if you wish to keep in touch with them, right? So that's something that you need to do when you're having a discussion with them. Right now, how to leave a conversation in a social gathering, right? So tomorrow, if you're in a party or a conference and you need to kind of leave it, there is nothing wrong with ending a conversation with someone. However, ensure that you end it on a polite note. Thank them and let them know you enjoyed speaking to them. You can use statements like, well, I'm sure you have a lot of other people to catch up with. Hey, it's been great talking to you, but I'm going to mingle a little bit, which means I'm going to talk to other people. I need to refill my drink. It was nice to talk to you. I need to make a phone call. Excuse me. So you can use these excuses to kind of move on from one conversation, especially when you're in a social gathering, which is a party or a business kind of conference where there are lots of people. You can do that. Right now, additional tips. So this is how you can kind of end conversations. Now, additional tips: remember and use the other person's name. How often you meet someone and realize less than 5 seconds later that you have absolutely no idea what his or her name is, right? I'm guilty of this, by the way. I'm very, very bad at remembering names. So in business settings, what I tend to do is, even if I'm in front of them or if I'm doing a call like this with them, I will always, as soon as the person says his name, if he gives me his card, I'll keep his card right in front of me so that I can look at his name, and then it kind of gets affixed in my head. If there's no card, I kind of, as soon as the person gives me his name, I'll write his name down right in front of me on my notepad, so then I can look at it and keep saying his name through the conversation, because remembering and saying a person's name really helps. If I don't have some place to write it down, if I don't have a card, I get into real trouble here, right? Because I'm bad at it. But yeah, this is something I need to get better at myself. Be mindful when you're meeting a new person and really focus on their name. If you still forget their name, you can politely ask them, like, by the way, I'm so bad at names, I'm sorry, but what is your name again? Right? So ask the person and get their name, right? Don't just act like you know it. My uncle actually taught me this technique, but you can use it only if you're really smooth. If you don't know somebody's name and if you've been talking to him for a while, you ask him saying, hey, what's your name? And he says, my name is Swapnil. And you say, Arey, I know your first name, what's your second name? He'll say Kamat. So now you know his first name and his second name, right? So this is a trick that you can pull off. But if the other person knows this trick, then he's gonna call you out on it, right? But that was a great technique, I thought. Use the person's name at least once or twice in the conversation. For example, well, it was nice talking to you, Swapnil, right? So remembering names and saying a person's name in a conversation is a great thing. People like that. Okay, now dealing with silence. When there is silence in a conversation, you may immediately assume that it's an awkward silence. A period of silence will always feel much longer than it is. So don't feel stressed about how long the break in conversation is, right? So that's what tends to happen when you're making conversation, that silence seems like a very, very long silence. And actually a good way for you to know whether you're close to a person or not in a relationship is if you're comfortable with silence on the table, right? If you're sitting next to them and if you're doing your thing, they're doing their thing, that's a indicator of your closeness, in a way that you're not forced to have conversation with them. Think of silence as nothing but a break. Use it as a transition to a new topic, or if you feel the conversation is finished, you can use this to exit from the situation, right? So that's what silence is about. In a way, it shows you that okay, one conversation is ended. We should probably talk about something else, and we've given you a host of things that you can possibly talk about when one topic ends. So you must kind of remember that in a way and use it. Don't by heart it. Even if you remember like three or four of those things, that will really help you maneuver a conversation in a better way. And sometimes if there's silence and you also see the other person's body language being closed, or he gives you an indicator that this conversation is over, that's a good indicator for you to kind of move on, whether it's a business or a personal conversation. Now, what to avoid? This section is brilliantly done. Please pay attention here because this will help you make conversation. What to avoid? Don't talk about controversial or negative topics as far as possible, right? Topics such as religion, politics, money, medical conditions should be avoided with people you meet for the first time, right? Especially the first time. You should really avoid these things. Also, discussing things like bad relationships, your annoying boss, killings, or anything that can suck out another person's energy may leave a bad impression, right? So again, you don't want to, especially in your initial conversations with a person, you don't want to come across as somebody that's whiny, right? That's complaining all the time. That's a really bad impression to set. Now, this is the second thing. Don't try to take over the spotlight. Do not interrupt a person when they're talking in order to turn the attention back to you. Do not assume your story is more important than theirs and make it all about you. There should always be a balance between listening and speaking, right? In any case, if sometimes what happens is that you may feel a person is finished and you may start talking, and if you realize that they haven't apologized, then keep quiet and let them continue, right? So as far as possible, let the person finish totally, but there could be times where you feel that the person is finished because they've taken a slightly longish pause, but they haven't. And if you interrupt them, apologize, keep quiet, and let them finish, right? That's the kind of rule of conversation. Yes, Arunima, come in.
What if the person you're speaking with, he or
Hmm.
she brings up a topic like religion or politics? What do you do?
Ah, so I'll tell you what I do. A topic like politics actually is not a great topic of interest to me. Not that I'm not aware of what's happening in the political world. I just know that those topics are way above my pay grade, right? And by pay grade, I mean way above my level of understanding. By neither I'm a
Mm,
politician. I understand. I run an organization, so I know how difficult it is to run anything, and I know that being in government is one of the toughest things to do, right? So my approach to that is to keep quiet because I don't know that much about it.
mhm,
And if the other party is very knowledgeable about the subject of politics, I'll just ask him questions connected to it.
mhm.
That's what I would do again, right? And I wouldn't kind of get into arguments with them, right?
Got
So if
it.
somebody said, for example, that, oh, AAP is the best party, right? Somebody's like going about AAP, I'm like, okay, if I need to make conversation with that person, I'll say, and if, for example, if my preference is for another political party, the most stupid thing
Mhm.
to do is try to argue with him, right? Saying that, oh, this is better, that's better. What's the use of that, right? There's no use
Correct.
coming out of that discussion unless you're a politician, right? And people fight over such stupid things because they don't have better things to do, basically, right? So then I'll say, what do you like about AAP, right, as a party? And I'll genuinely ask him, right? And if the
Mm,
person is from Delhi, I'm like, what are some of the on ground changes that you've really seen them do? And again, I
mm,
will reserve my judgment on it. I'm not going to kind of jump in and say, what are two or three things that they've done that you really liked? Oh, that's interesting. Can you tell me more about that? Right? I'll ask you, what are some of the things that you didn't really like, right?
Mhm.
And then at best, my comment on it is something that I really understand or know for sure about that thing, where I say, I think that what aap has done is good in this, but I feel that a few of these things from my observation wasn't the best thing that they could do. I'm not going and saying this is a terrible thing that they've done, and this is because we don't know enough about those topics. I'll say
Correct.
I think that this is something that there is. And you've got no idea, very strangely, right before we started this class, like literally a minute before we started this class, I have a friend that loves talking about these larger than life political issues, everything from British India to whatever. And I genuinely don't have any interest in indulging and going back and forth about these topics because they're of no interest to me. But if I meet
Correct.
him, I will try to learn from him by asking questions and not really forcing my opinion onto him, right?
Understood.
Which brings us to our next slide. Don't try to win the conversation, right? And that's what a lot of people try to do in that political. You can have a great political discussion on something if you don't have the approach of saying, I need to win this argument, I need to win this conversation. If you keep winning a side, and if you don't have judgment through questions, you can learn a lot and just keep quiet about it, right? There's no such thing as a winner in a conversation discussion. Instead of proving that you're better than the other person with whom you are talking, sit back and listen. It's okay to express your opinion and don't try to convince everyone that you're right. Okay, this is such a important point if you want to be great at conversation, right? These are my stars that I'm putting around these things. If you do this, you will save yourself so much of trouble, agony, misunderstandings, fights with families, friends. Have you seen anybody that fights over WhatsApp in family groups? Those are the people that often have the most amount of time, right? And that's the most useless activity to do. You're not going to convince anybody on a WhatsApp group on anything, right? It just shows that you're not spending your time doing enough of things which are productive, right? So please get to that. Now, practicing your skills. How can you go about doing that? Start at home, right? Practicing at home will help you slowly build your skills in a safe and comfortable environment. Talk to your parents, spouse, and kids over dinner. Ask them how their day went or anything else that comes to your mind, right? Tell them about what happened in your day, the movie that you want to watch, the book that you finished reading, your new colleagues, so on and so forth. You can also practice conversational skills during family parties so that you can converse with people out of your immediate family circle, right? So if you want to get better at this, let's start at home, right? Like we just started the discussion by saying, um, a lot of our relationships with our immediate family aren't good enough because we don't make quality conversations with them, and sometimes deep conversations with them. Come on, let's start doing that, right? With our immediate family members, and it's a slightly more comfortable zone. Meet a lot of new people and make conversation with them, right? So after you're comfortable making conversation with people at home, bettering the quality of conversation immediately, start by making small talk with someone you already know, perhaps a co-worker at office whom you don't talk too much. So that's how you can practice. Next, making conversation with someone familiar but you don't really know, right? So pick out one person that you don't know at all, then pick out one person that you know but don't really know well, and kind of start conversing with him. That's good practice. Move on to making conversation with someone who's a stranger to you, but someone your friend knows. If you're meeting a friend for lunch, ask them to bring along a friend of theirs you've never met before, right? So that's another way to do it. Now, this is a stranger, but he's connected to you through a friend. So that's another person that you can kind of talk to. The only way to get better is to practice. With each subsequent social situation, you will feel more and more comfortable. Yes, Arunima.
Yeah, I think so. The whole intention behind this is slowly kind of up the challenge. So
Correct.
first you talk to someone you kind of know, and like you said, then it's someone you're not really familiar with, and the advantage of sort of having your friend bring along someone is that your friend kind of serves as that a person who can facilitate a conversation.
Yeah.
So you're not completely with a stranger and you don't know what to talk about. Yet this
Correct.
is also a person you don't know at all. So that you also have a safety net and you can also kind of have a
Correct.
conversation with them. So the whole point is just keep challenging yourself,
Correct.
and more as you do it. And something we've talked about a lot is practice. So the more you
Correct.
practice, the better you get.
Correct, correct, correct. I just thought of one thing. Just remind me to share it at the end. Something that we've shared in our body language class in terms of
Mm-hmm.
distance between people when they're conversing. But that's something I'd like to end with. Right now,
Sure.
Arunima, just to and we've had this discussion in the past, and I've told you about the last kind of almost 5 to 6 years that my father was alive. I kind of realized the importance of conversing with him,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I realized that I wouldn't really do that before, right? Where I just ask him questions like, even like full disclosure, Arunima and myself are cousins, right? So we have a common ancestral home that we have, and then when I would go to that ancestral home, I would have some time to spend with him, and then I would just ask him questions like saying that he used to live in Canada. So I would ask him questions like, so why did you decide to go to Canada? Why did you really decide? What was wrong here? And then I'll ask him, so what would you like doing in Canada, right? What did you not like? And I knew this superficially from my father, but I never really had a conversation with him on it, on saying, who are some of your best friends there? Do you miss talking to them? And it was amazing, the kind of that we got even closer in the kind of last 5 or 6 years that he was alive, right? That was so amazing that I actually made conversation with a person I was so close to that I didn't do earlier, right? So the previous slide of saying start with your kids, start with your spouse, start with your parents, start with all the people there, you have enough scope to practice, and that is going to further your relationship, right? To do it. And again, right, when you meet people from office, it could be a colleague that you've known for the longest time, you can ask questions and kind of make conversation to him and further build your relationship, right, with him. So this is something that we'd recommend that you do at home. Have a conversation for each of the following situations. Have a conversation with a close family member on something, a topic you wouldn't typically talk to them about, right? And try to make conversation with someone new. A person need not be a complete stranger. However, you shouldn't know them well. For example, a neighbor from your building, right? So these are two kind of things that if you can do this before your life coaching class, great. Okay, I can't force you into doing this, especially the second one, but at least do the first one before your live coaching class, so you can really make note of your experience and share at least the first one, right? Because you have access to a close family member, and try to do this one as well and kind of take it to your closing. Okay. Okay, with that we come to an end of this topic. um, this is a point where you write down 3 to 5 of your takeaways, and discuss those takeaways with your coach, and of course you're going to summarize the content of this to the coach in the live coaching class, right? The final point that I want to share before we end is the distance between two people when you're speaking. So the distance just needs to be one arm's distance, right? So that's kind of fairly good distance between two people. Is one arm distance or a little more than one arm's distance, right? So that's fairly good distance. Anything typically closer than that one arm's distance, it comes in a rather it's somebody only who's a close family or close friend that comes closer than that one arm's distance to you, right? But generally when you're talking to people, that's a good kind of length between you and the person. One arm's distance or a little more than one arm's distance. Yes, Arunima, did you have any final comments to make?
No, none.
Okay, cool. So yes, pause the lecture, do your takeaways. And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, to be here through this lecture. This is a very interesting topic. We had a great time kind of putting this content together for you. We had content, but we went all out to research it more and really give you something solid that is going to help you now and for the rest of your life. Now, I'll just like to share something with you, right? Um, Anything that you learn always feels unnatural to start with, and then when you get used to it or you get more practice, it becomes very natural. What do I mean by that? If you learn to drive a car, especially a car which is a geared car, the first 10 times or 15 times that you drive a car, it is a very unnatural thing, which means you're really struggling. You're paying attention to the gears, accelerator, clutch. You're doing all kinds of things. It doesn't happen naturally. But once you get used to driving, you are listening to music sometimes or making conversation with the person sitting next to you and driving. and you're making no conscious effort towards changing the gears. It's all happening naturally and automatically. If you are somebody that's not good at making conversations, a lot of what we've discussed here may seem very forced or may seem like something where you need to take a lot of effort to do it. I can assure you, initially it may seem and it will be some effort that you need to take. But the minute you get past that certain threshold of practice on making conversations, the same thing which would take effort will become a habit and will become very natural for you to do. Right? So give yourself that time for something to become natural. The minute it gets tough to start with, if you quit it, you will never get to that point where it becomes natural. That's like quitting your driving class. You have 10 driving classes, and because it's not natural to you after the first 3 or 4, you quit. And then you'll feel that, oh, I wasn't born to drive. Right? Everybody can drive if they take a certain amount of effort to learn it. Right? There's nothing, no such thing as born to drive or not born to drive. If you take the effort, you learn it. Some people will learn it a little quicker by the 8th class, some people will learn by the 10th class. Right? But you will learn it in the end. So exactly like that, when it comes to this conversational skills, it will seem a little unnatural to start with practice, with time, that same thing will become very natural for you. Right? So make the breakthrough that is required to get to the point where it's natural. Okay. Thank you very much. Bye bye. I will see y'all soon. Thank you very much.